We are very excited today to be here supporting the Sundance Film Festival. My name is Kelly Leahy, and I'm excited to be talking with these panelists about media and young people today, looking forward to all the way to Generation Alpha, our littlest generation. And today I've asked each of our panelists to begin by just introducing themselves and their connection to children's media. They're quite different. So can I go ahead and ask, let's see, David, do you want to start?
Sure, I'm glad to. I'm David Kleeman. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Trends for a company called Dubit. Dubit has been around since 1999 as a game studio, and it's now kind of a two-part company, a research and strategy consultancy around children and youth and media, and a metaverse game studio, which mostly means we're building a lot of games in Roblox, Core, about to be building in Fortnite Creative, and so on. But I've been in children's media for 35 years, which means multi-channel cable to the metaverse.
You're being very modest. David is just one of the most well-known experts on children's media in the world, and I mean the world. So thanks for joining us today, David. Joanne, would you like to introduce yourself to us?
I would be happy to. I'm Joanne Parsont. I'm the Director of Education for the California Film Institute. We are based in Marin County, California, just north of San Francisco. We are a nonprofit film arts organization that runs a 3-screen art house theater, the Smith Raphael Film Center, but is probably most known for running the annual Mill Valley Film Festival. I run all of our education programs, but I also program all of the family films for the Mill Valley Film Festival, something that I have been doing dating back to 1996, not quite as long as David, but I'm definitely right in there with more than 25 years programming children's films, both for Mill Valley. I also worked for the San Francisco International Film Festival and programmed for the Pacific Film Archive in Berkeley, did some curating for many places. Anyway, just been doing a lot of children's film programming and been in that space for quite a long time.
Yeah, and Mill Valley Film Festival is one of the most well-respected children and family film festivals in the world. So thank you. Thanks for joining us. This is exciting.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yes. Lindsay Eberts, would you care to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. And you said it right. Thank you so much, Kelly. Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsay Eberts, and I am trying. Do I get to say I'm a film producer yet? I am a film producer. I just did my first feature-length documentary. My connection to Sundance really is my other role. I feel like I'm one of the 3 keepers of the spirit and legend that was my amazing father, Jake Eberts, who, if you're over a certain age, you will have seen many of his films. He was an extraordinary film producer, but an even better human. And he was involved in Sundance for many decades. The institutes, that means the catalog, the resort, the film festival, the everything. So I got to be the Nepo baby who got to go along with him for many, many years. And I got the opportunity to volunteer for them twice. And along with him, Sundance and the spirit of independent storytellers is the thing that gets me up and going every single day. And my connection to children's programming, I was a child, definitely remember that. And then my dad did several films that were, for young audiences. One that we used to love to tease him about, Super Mario Brothers, which was a bit of a stinker. But there's a couple other ones like Chicken Run and James the Giant Peach, which were much beloved stories, obviously for young audiences. So he also did a lot of family films, things like March of the Penguins and some other things. So part of why I'm here is because I love emerging storytellers, and I want to do everything in my power to help encourage people to tell their stories, and especially to this kind of niche audience. But again, like I mentioned, I'm here with a little bit of a connection to Sundance and the keeper of the spirit of that great man who's no longer with us, who would have absolutely loved to have been here. So I don't have the mustache he does, but he's there. So
and Lindsay, I'll mention Lindsay also just produced a film about a documentary about children, which is another reason she was invited to be on the panel. Very touching and hard to watch, frankly, documentary about children. So you can say more about that later. All right, Julio, welcome to you.
Hi, everyone. Hello, it's a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Julio Vincent Gambuto. Hello from New York City. I am an independent filmmaker. I'm a writer-director, and my debut feature came out during the pandemic. It's called Team Marco, and it was for children and families. We premiered at the Mill Valley Film Festival, actually, where we won a wonderful award from the audience. My background is primarily, before that, was in children's television. I worked for Nickelodeon for about 4 or 5 years on a series for Nick, and I'm currently working with a company called Kerner Entertainment, which did Clifford and the Mighty Ducks back in the day, and we're working on an animated movie at the moment for children and families. So yeah, I come to the panel as a filmmaker deep in the trenches of independent filmmaking, fundraising, everything from sort of idea through who's going to buy it and where is it going to be. So it's a pleasure to be with you all today.
Wonderful. Thank you and welcome. And Julianna, would you care to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Julianna Notten. I am also a writer and director of youth and children's media, a lot of coming of age films. Similar to Julio, my debut feature is actually just coming out. We just finished our festival run. And we also won the Audience Choice Award for Best Family Film at the Mill Valley Film Festival, where I met Joanne. Yeah, and I also teach workshops and filmmaking sessions to youth in my spare time. And before that, I also did a lot of other shorts that were also coming of age films for young people.
So great. Okay, what a great, diverse, and interesting group. You all come from different areas, and I think what you have to say is going to be hopeful and helpful to the young people at Newhouse School and beyond joining us today. And I'm hopeful that folks joining us from the film industry are also going to find this conversation very interesting. I've structured the conversation, the beginning of it anyways, to start with sort of the production cycle and marketplace, then over to children's content and how that's been changing. We'll talk about audiences as well as diversity, equity, inclusion, and representation. And we'll also cover the idea of how to break into the business. The stories from these 3 filmmakers in particular and a festival runner will probably be very instructive to some of you. So I'm going to start with Julio. I'd like to prompt this question your way. So the children's media landscape has changed just enormously over the past, 10, 20, 25 years, 30, 50, I don't know what parameters we want to set. But I was wondering if you'd talk about the changes to the production cycle and marketplace during your own experience producing and directing.
Sure.
And writing.
Sure. I think it's important to realize that there's a lot of very large forces at play and a lot of big economic changes that have happened across the industry in general in the last 20 years. And, there was a time where the studios were making 11 and 12 and 13 movies a year. Even before that, they were making 20 and 30 movies a year back in their sort of founding days. And now that number is probably closer to 4 or 5. So, along the way, that has sort of made, at least from my perspective as a filmmaker, there are fewer and fewer live action films for families and children that are coming from the studios. That said, the flip side of that is now we've got so many more places for children's media and kids media across the entire landscape. So, we've got everything from, expanding television channels and television market. We've got animation, all the studios have invested in animation over the last 15 to 20 years. And so, once those companies are built, they want to keep making animated movies, which travel very well around the world. Another element to that, of course, is that it used to be that the audience was about 70% American and 30% international when you thought about distributing a movie, and now that's flipped. So about 30 to 40% are domestic and the rest is international. So, animation travels very well. And so there are a lot of factors at play, I think, in changing the landscape. It might mean fewer movies in the theater for kids and family, but it certainly doesn't mean less media. There's actually more media now for children and more access points for children and kids and families. So.
Sorry, David, did you want to jump in there?
I was mostly saying that you were muted, but sure. I'd love to, actually. And let me start by saying that on this panel, I'm the Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the others because I'm not primarily in the film side of things. I'm really across the full range of media that kids consume, whether from our research or from what we produce. But I'm going to start with a fairly startling statistic that we just discovered at Dubit recently, and that is that kids today, 2 to 18, watch as many minutes per week of user-generated content, TikTok, YouTube, the things that are made by their peers, or some are made by professionals or influencers and such, but they're user-generated as many minutes as they do of professional content, the Netflix, the films, things like that. That really changes the landscape. That one thing that we can say is that it changes the development cycle that is going to work for the media world. That we no longer really have the luxury of the 3 to 5 year development cycle that a film or a television series can take. Because by the time something comes out, it's not really responding to what kids' world is right then. That's one of the reasons why you see them flock to a YouTube or a TikTok. It's so instantaneous. Or, one of my favorite examples of someone trying to disrupt that is Sinking Ship Productions in Canada, that during the pandemic turned around a series called Lockdown in about 4 weeks, from the concept to production to distribution on YouTube Originals in about 4 weeks. And they did it by distributing phones to the actors who shot a series that looked like what the actors were living through. It was made to simulate TikTok and YouTube and Zoom and all the things and messaging, all the things they were going through. And it was a series that didn't just deal with lockdown, but dealt with all the ancillary things that were so important during that time of family economics, of vulnerable relatives, of racism. They really worked a lot into that series, but it responded so quickly that the young people loved it because it was what they were living in the moment.
Yeah, and Julia, do you want to talk a little bit about your own COVID experience as well? Because I think one of the most exciting things during that period was all the experimentation that happened with people jumping into different mediums, trying things they'd never tried. And you have a great example of that.
Sure. COVID was obviously such a painful time for everybody, especially those first few months. And I think we were all looking at these technological tools as a way to connect. We couldn't leave our homes. For me, I specifically wanted to connect with my nephews and my niece. I'm Italian American, so I'm used to a weekly hug, right? I'm used to a weekly interaction, and certainly not that other cultures don't have that, but there's a lot of pressure on ours to make sure it's weekly, and so that didn't happen, and so I decided to start a trivia show for kids. And with the help of California Film Institute, they sort of helped me promote it a bit. And we did daily episodes in those early days of the pandemic to help kids process what was going on. And at first, the first 50 days were me in my apartment with a flat screen screen behind me. And I would write questions that morning and put them up and shave my face and put a suit and tie on and kind of do a Mr. Rogers act because parents were looking for anything that would help their kids process what was going on in the world. It was primarily trivia, but baked in were lessons about resilience and comfort and loved ones and what we were trying to learn from the mess around us. So I think there were just a lot of artists jumping. I certainly was not the only one. Facebook and Twitter and YouTube were full of artists trapped at home. who wanted to help and really rose to the occasion. So I think it was and hopefully it will not be another moment that we have to repeat. But it was certainly an opportunity, I think, to reach out and try to be helpful.
Thank you for that. And I want to, while we're on this topic of COVID, which I'd love to drop like a hot potato, Joanne, I wanted to also offer you this moment to just talk about the lasting impact and challenges it's presented to the film industry in general. Oops, sorry, excuse me. If you could talk about the film industry and what you've seen as a result of COVID, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure we've all probably experienced this, but obviously the theater exhibition business has taken a significant hit. Our organization, like I said, runs a 3-screen art house nonprofit theater. And like all theaters saw, we were shut for a very long time. And, since we've been back online and in person, it's been a steady build, but we're not even close to anywhere back to where we were before. And there's just a very, significant dynamic of people just not, comfortable being back in theaters. And of course, having adapted to their whole new life of everything that they can stream and watch at home, and why bother? And, I can make my own snacks and I can take all the breaks I want and I can watch it anytime I want to in my pajamas. And why would I bother? And, and for a lot of people, there are very real reasons not to come into a theater and be in a crowded space. And for a lot of people, it's just like they've found, that alternative. And because there's so many different formats now and platforms and places for people to get their content, it's just, it's hard. And it's also, it's always been a process for us of, sort of teaching and training young people about, the excitement and the experience of being in a movie theater and what that means and what that feels like. And that's something, of course, that as a film festival, we are always trying to create and encourage. And it's definitely gotten harder. And I would say it's gotten harder even more so, certainly for older kids, for teenagers, for Gen Z, way more than Gen Alpha, which, by the way, is a term I didn't even know existed yet. So thanks so much for letting me know what the latest Gen was. I had no idea that there was a Gen Alpha. But we had, for the first time since pre-pandemic, at the Mill Valley Film Festival in October, was the first time we had students back in the theater as part of our education program. And I have to say it was actually incredibly heartening, because we had, they came back in droves, and particularly the younger kids. And I think just, the ability to recognize that experience again. But organizationally, we're taking a huge hit because, the finances are not in our favor as far as, exhibition. And, what it requires is really essentially what we eventize most of our programming to the best that we can, because it's really about creating that special experience that will draw people in, having, live people to speak, filmmakers in persons, and, other live events, whether there's, a music component or, a special guest or some connection, that can really bring people in. And obviously we do a lot of that in the film festival situation. It's always, that exciting special event, but that in itself, as the, running the family film section, that's been a real challenge though, still, to bring in the families and the, the young people. There's a lot of conflicting, not just content, but obviously other things to conflict with their time that make it it's gotten, just incredibly challenging. But we're still fighting the good fight, because the content is still being made. I mean, that's the thing. It's really we rely so much on all the incredible films that are being produced that make that possible, and that are starting to bring people back. But, I know we'll dig a little bit more into kind of what that means in the family film space, because I have a lot of specific thoughts on that.
To what Joanne was just saying about the range of places for distribution right now, we're in a really interesting and kind of fraught time, because a lot of families bought into a lot of streaming services, video on demand services, subscriptions during the pandemic, whether it was video, games, music, all kinds of things, to keep their families happy, to keep everyone engaged. And now, as we come out of it, they're looking at the bottom line of how much they've been spending and starting to say, oh, we're paying a little more than we thought we were. We're going to have to cut back. As they do that, we're also in fairly difficult economic times. And so we're really at this tipping point right now, and we haven't seen in our research which way it's going to go, of whether families are going to start going back out again, start going back to the cinema, back to the theaters, and spending the money there, or whether they're going to say, well, maybe all those subscription services weren't such a bad thing if the economy's bad and we don't have to go out and buy dinner and pay for parking and all those things. So it's a really difficult time to assess right now.
Yes, indeed. And I've actually even noticed as a consumer, just the change in behavior in theaters, that people talk a lot more now. Everybody used to watch it in their living room and talking out loud to their family. And it's a really different dynamic. Have you guys noticed that as well? Yep. Okay. Did Lindsay or Julianna, did either of you want to comment on this before I move on to the next question? I just want to check in.
I'm listening and rapt. So thank you. I'm just so excited to be hearing.
Great.
The one thing I did want to add, Kelly, is, to David's point earlier about production cycles, we're seeing this in almost every other form of media as well, right? So even books and magazines, and I'm in the process myself of writing a book at the moment, and it's outdated by the time it gets off of your laptop.
Yep.
And so this idea that it would take 3 years to write a book is sort of preposterous now in this environment. And news magazines that were monthly, that's a joke at this point too, because a month later, by the time it gets to your house, it's 6 weeks later and none of it is news. So I think the elements or the dynamics that David is pointing out are really real, and they land right on the desk of producers, because ideas that seem really great right now, unless you can mobilize really fast, they're not worth doing, right? Because, oh gosh, by the time we get the funding together, get the production together, get it into the festivals the way that the festival schedule is set up, no one's going to see this movie until 2 years from now. And so that starts to, affect the actual content, because then you start thinking about how can I future-proof it? How can it be something that's lasting and universal? Does that mean it becomes sort of less specific and less germane to the moment? And then that obviously has its own implications. So there are real sort of real world effects from those forces.
Yeah, I even feel like there's, oh, go ahead. Lindsay,
Sorry,
go
well,
ahead.
just jumping quickly to say that reminded me of something else that I've been thinking about so much, which is attention spans, not only of children, but the format of what we're trying to create or wanting to create is changing that rapidly as well. There's a lot of research coming out now about, well, it has been for years. So the attention span thing is very, very interesting. Where do you get your audiences? How long can they stay with you? And the other thing I'll mention, because my documentary that I was involved with is about children, like Kelly mentioned, as I kind of joke around, it's a bit of a bummer. And, post-COVID, it's really about the trauma from residential schools. We call them residential schools in Canada, and they're called Indian boarding schools in the US. Happened all over the world. There are over 2,000, I've heard the numbers, between 2,000 and 8,000 bodies of children found on school grounds. It's really, really dark stuff. And what's interesting is, especially after COVID, this film started right before COVID, but during COVID, people were so stressed out already that they're having a hard time sitting down and consuming now media that's about stress or mental health or all these things that are absolutely necessary. Our film, I really feel, is a bit biased, but required viewing for every single person in North America, because it's a shock of how people don't know, and it'll help transform people's views on Indigenous people all over the world, but especially North America. So it was very difficult to me to hear from a friend who said they didn't watch my film on Netflix Canada, and they went and watched a documentary about 4 kids, the Thai cave kids that were locked under in the underwater caves for days on end. And I thought, wow, still about kids, still super stressful, but they chose that film over the one of a person that they know who was involved. It's interesting to me how people choose what to watch, especially based on our stress levels, and parents choosing what their kids are focusing their attention on. That has also changed rapidly over the last few years.
Yeah, and that's a perfect transition into this, into talking about the content of the programming and how much that's been shifting. As David mentioned, we know that young people are really watching a lot online. When we look at social media, 95% of Gen Z does watch YouTube. So it's an enormous reach, that social media channel. And they tend to watch a lot of upbeat, laughing lifestyle. I mean, it's such unusual content. It's so different from what adult producers of film and television typically make. I mean, the content's just dramatically different. So as we think about the shifts in content, I think, Joanne, I was just wondering if you could talk some about what you've seen in the film industry in particular, domestic and global. I know you have insight into so many different pieces of this as a curator.
Yeah, well, obviously I've seen a lot over time, a lot of films come and go. And obviously from a film perspective, it's really very much about the storytelling. That to me is what the difference is between, that specific medium and a lot of the other, it's really because it is very much about the storytelling and the quality of the storytelling. And, what I've seen over time and what actually unfortunately has stayed pretty consistent is that it's actually really challenging to find, independent English language family films that are original and that are not Disney, that are not Pixar, that, I had told Julio at the time when his film was submitted to Mill Valley that, I mean, literally he was like a unicorn for me. And, this was only in 2019, as far as just, a high quality, very well produced, well acted, original story that was both funny but also heartwarming, that was appropriate for a wide range of audiences and was just a feel-good film. Like they're very rarely made in this country. It's something that, as a film festival curator, a huge portion of my content has always come from abroad, primarily from Europe, where those types of films are heavily funded or subsidized by government support, which is obviously something that doesn't exist in this country. That's a huge part of it, that, the concept of film as an educational resource and tool is something that's very well understood, particularly from a media literacy perspective and just a family film audience perspective in other countries that we just don't have here. We just rely on Disney and Pixar to just do the heavy lifting, and no one wants to compete with them. And generally speaking, most filmmakers, it's always seen as unglamorous and unsexy to be in that side of the business. So nobody wants to do it, even though, if you look obviously at the audience numbers, kids will go back to see the same film over and over and over and over again. They watch it and, it never gets tired. So like you have this constant evergreen audience, but that does not seem to work in their favor. So being able to find that content has always been a challenge. And when, same thing when Julianna's film, came across that, it was like the opportunity also to have a film that was about, a queer tween that wasn't even specifically a coming out story. It was just, about a queer tween, which was fine, which was just normal, but like, and seeing the evolution of those types of storylines of seeing, like what used to always be, young, mostly white boys, then gradually evolved into a lot of, young girls, and then finally gradually evolved into more, young people of color and young people, queer young people, like, a greater diversity in the subject matter that I think we've seen across across films in general. But like, the family film segment is pretty small in this country, and as far as from an independent basis, and it's really hard to find that content and to find the original storytelling that I think will resonate with young people. And, there just aren't enough filmmakers in my mind, like Julio and Julianna, who are making those kinds of films, because it's not strongly encouraged or supported. It's hard. I mean, I'm sure that they can both speak to, finding the funding for it, obviously, which is where it begins, and finding the funding for those films and convincing funders that this is an audience that's worth speaking to is challenging, which is, again, crazy, because it's an audience that is hungry for content. And even though there's a lot competing with it, we all know that film is one of the most powerful meetings we have because of its capacity for storytelling and its capacity for empathy and, you know, resonance. It's just, there's so much there. And, you know, and that Hollywood still has the same, you know, just the idea of the film industry is still so compelling for young people that they want to be a part of it. They still get, you know, caught up in the excitement of it. So, you know, there just isn't enough of an infrastructure that's really supporting that, particularly from the funding level, is my personal opinion.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I agree with everything you just said. I was like so nervous when I was pitching Erin's Guide to Kissing Girls, my feature, because it was so different from the sort of Canadian cinema. I'm from Toronto, and just like youth and like queer cinema that I had seen coming out, which was more focused on, as Joanne said, like coming out and like rooted in tragedy, which are like still important stories to tell, but like begin to feel like they're the only ones. And they were also all focused on a certain age group, which was, you know, starting at least like, you know, end of high school. Whereas like now with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, like they are chronically online and like can, you know, do research and like they know so much more about, you know, sexuality and gender identities than I ever did at their age. And so they're like feeling like they can come out at younger and younger ages, or not even come out, like, you know, that's starting to slowly become like a past term. But you know, they're not seeing themselves represented, you know, in media, especially not in live action media. And so that's why I felt so strongly about telling this story. And I think the reason why it got picked up is because there was nothing else like it at the time.
Great. And Julia, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit about your own film?
Sure. Well, I actually wanted to just add to what Joanne was saying about infrastructure, because I think, you know, there's a really different perspective that European film has than American film has. And when you look, you know, when we were starting to submit to festivals with a live action, American made English language film for kids and families, there's only about 5 festivals to go to, right? So I'm sure, in fact, there are more, but there was kind of, you know, there are only a few names that pop up. So, you know, I think part of the challenge is that, you know, festivals are responding to what's being made, but then what's being made is responding to the spaces that festivals sort of create for that type of content. So, you know, if we had more film festivals that had children's programming, had an arm very much like Joanne works in at Mill Valley, you might sort of see more of an emphasis from filmmakers. You know, the other part of that too is, I think from our perspective, as you're beginning your career, you know, the sort of unfortunate name of the game is you want to stand out and you kind of have to pop out because of how competitive the landscape is. And so most filmmakers are going as extreme as they can in content, in voice, and sometimes that's an incredible thing, and sometimes it's not. But family programming isn't really a part of that extremity per se. So I think that, you know, creates another challenge. And, you know, when we made Marco, we really knew like we were either going to be creating something that would help expand that world, or no one was going to know what to do with us. And the unfortunate news is nobody knew what to do with us. And so even after a rather, you know, sort of successful premiere at Mill Valley, distributors were kind of like, okay, well, are we going to compete with Disney by taking this on? Or do we have the marketing budget to take this on and do right by it and do it really well? So, you know, those are big concerns when you've gone out and raised the money yourself and have made this and have taken that risk. I would do it over again in a heartbeat, but it doesn't mean it was necessarily successful on paper financially, right? So there's a lot of considerations there, you know, with respect to how how much of a splash you can make if you're not making things that are considered cutting edge, you know.
Right. And can I just add is that's why it feels so important to me that a festival like Sundance has finally added a kid section. You know, that's relatively new. I've been waiting for that for decades. Because but you know, but also, you know, I was watching, you know, virtually, I was watching one of the kids' films yesterday online and watched the Q&A afterwards. And, you know, there was some comment during the Q&A about how the fact that, of course, there were mostly adults in the audience because they haven't cultivated, it's not seen as a space where, you know, families feel like they belong or that they can find the films that they're looking for. So, but I think it's really important for them to stick with that and hold on, you know, so that they can build on that audience and be, you know, dedicated to that, because I think that we need festivals at the caliber of Sundance that are demonstrating that there is value there, even if it is just 3 films at festival, that's fine. It demonstrates that something's there. And I think, like you said, Julie, like that ideally would have an impact on the broader industry to see that there's value, you know, but it takes time to build that. And I think it's really critical for more organizations to recognize that. I mean, there are some really great Children's Film Festival, you know, New York International Children's Film, you know, big shout out to them. Seattle started to do some really great work. You know, I get a lot of my stuff from Berlin, but like it's starting to, you know, the seeds are there, and I think they're starting to finally realize it. And I think if, you know, if Sundance can continue that that practice, I feel like that could go a really long way.
Oddly enough, I wrote letters to the Sundance people probably 25, 30 years ago saying, what about kid dance? Why don't you have kid dance? So I guess I was just ahead of my time. I want to bring in a perspective, a different part of my work perspective, and that is that I'm the chair of the advisory board for the International Children's TV Festival, the Prix Jeunesse that takes place in Munich every other year. So I've gotten a chance to see what children's television looks like from literally all around the world. We get entries from 60 different countries usually. And that's led me to some of the international film festivals as well, like Cinekid in the Netherlands. Joanne mentioned that we understand a lot about film as an educational medium. I think we also need to think about film as a cultural medium. And when you've got Hollywood, when you've got Disney pumping out global hits, it's very hard to think of what's American film, not what's global film, but what's American film. When I go to the Nordic countries, when I go to Netherlands, you know, all these places where they really feel this urgent need to sustain the culture through their film. And that's one of the reasons that you have government subsidies. I've found over time that the countries that do the best work for children in media, whether it's film or television, are the countries where children are valued at the upper levels of government, where, you know, the Nordic countries where they have a children's ombudsman in the cabinet. But I think one, you know, part of why we see it so much stronger film industries, children's film industries in other places, is that it is a response to, we need to give our kids something that lets them know when they wake up in the morning who they are and where they are.
I'll jump in here really quickly also to say that, because I'm also Canadian, grew up in England, and now I'm in Canada, and I love nothing more than government subsidies for artists and think it's vitally important. However, it also has this kind of effect of being a little bit stifling sometimes to art. I mean, my favorite thing is to talk to emerging filmmakers, tell them everything I know, all the mistakes I made, and all the kind of amazing gems that I learned from my dad. And he really couldn't make most of his films in Canada because the bureaucracy or the red tape, and the number of filmmakers that I talked to who say the government didn't approve of my film, I didn't get funding, so I didn't make it. And so there's this lovely little mix sometimes we hit on something where we're going to support incredible filmmakers with amazing ideas. And Julianna, I saw the trailer for your piece, like it is also for me. And it's so exciting that there are things like that now coming out of Canada. I think we're expanding and getting a lot of inspiration from our American pioneers and entrepreneurial spirit like that. But we can be really, really kind of, you know, red tapey in that way. And I often think, man, it's kind of like your grandmother. She's got some great ideas, but you don't want all your ideas to go through your grandmother, because she's not going to approve of, you know, some cutting edge thing necessarily. So, you know, don't take it as the be all and end all. When she says no, go out and, which is what my dad did all the time. He was told no. He's like, great, you're not my person. I'm going to go out and find funding anywhere else. And he did it over and over and over again for 40 years. And he kind of was just very, very focused. He also felt, I'm really talking to the emerging filmmakers in the audience now, just going, we're all talking about all these things that are very, very difficult, but I also want to, kind of encourage people to see also that there are still a lot of avenues where light is coming through. And I have to say, Joanne, I love that you're quite deferential to Sundance there. And I mean, if I could get a face tattoo of Sundance and what it has meant to me, I would. I love that place. I spent 30 years going there. We had that's my other home. Sundance is so successful at what they've done that they've become slightly inaccessible to the independent filmmakers of yesteryear. And those people are going to other types of festivals now. It is not the only festival, and especially those with really kind of bright, amazing ideas. If you don't get into Sundance, Mill Valley is one of the absolute top film festivals in the entire world, and absolutely in the US. And those kinds of places are becoming like South by Southwest, and there's a list of other places that will welcome, voices that are for different audiences. And what I loved about Julianna's piece that I saw was that it was multi-layered. Yes, it's a coming of age, but it's for queer kids, and it looks incredible. So the editing, the cinematography, the acting, the writing, all of those were of absolute top notch. And when you can find those those huge parts of the recipe and practice on shorts and keep going and get really, really good at storytelling, which is what Joanne mentions all the time. It's like, don't let what any of us are talking about kind of dissuade you from this, because the whole industry is a total gamble, by the way. It is very difficult, but it's also the most exciting thing.
Don't tell him. Don't tell him it's a total gamble. Just kidding.
Get out while you can.
Again, like I saw documentaries for, about kids, not for children so much as Sundance, but like they changed my life. Absolutely. I will never be the same after seeing documentaries. I'm totally biased because I'm a kid of a filmmaker and the sister of a filmmaker and trying to be one myself. But so I'm totally biased. But I think that there are people on this panel right now who have made incredible content, who have not everything that we're going to do is be a smashing success, but for those in the audience, I'm like, it's really difficult, but please keep doing it and open your mind to places like Mill Valley and YouTube and different formats. I mean, this is just the most exciting thing as well to me, is also hearing like, yeah, distribution model has completely changed. I'm speaking to people who have been in distribution for 30 years and they're like, we have no idea what's going on. They're like,
It's true.
Yeah, it's the Wild West out there.
Well, and if I could just sort of, and speaking to aspiring and, emerging filmmakers, the Sundance is always seen as this, beacon that everyone wants to get into Sundance. And I agree, it is not the be all end all, because it's, the competition is insane and it's fierce. And also once you get in there, you can get completely lost in, the morass of all the other films and the attention that's paid all around. But, so I think it's incredibly important to be, open to the idea that, there's hundreds and hundreds of film festivals, that have a variety of different niches and focuses. I'm sure, Julianna, you probably have been in, both, family film festivals and queer film festivals, and, there's a wide range of opportunities there. But I think, but we all know, Sundance holds a certain, cachet within of being able to drive certain practices and certain, standards, which is why I think, they're signing on to the fact that kids media means something, needs to be highlighted, needs to have a section, I think is really critical, and the rest of the industry getting that. In the same way that they sort of drove that around independent film in general from the beginning, like this, I feel like there's a window now of that chance to see like, there's potential there. And the fact that there are, it's interesting, that there actually are 3 English language live action features in that section this year, which, again, is hard to come by. And has been for me for, over 25 years. So it just, I think that's really, where I'm hoping that we see the change. But I think that for students and emerging filmmakers, like, don't put all your eggs into that Sundance basket. It's not gonna deliver a lot of chickens. That was terrible.
No, it's great. It was great. And while you this idea of different types of film festivals, which I think is such a great, sort of segue to different types of content too. And we're seeing so much exciting diversity. It sort of started on camera, right? We started seeing diverse actors, but now we're seeing a lot more diverse filmmakers, storytellers, and these critical concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion, even representation are so much on our minds. With Generation Alpha, we're seeing some of the early reports, because these kids are still, most of them, they haven't all been born yet, for one thing, because the marker of the generation is either 20 starting in 2010, 11 or 12, depending on the research you read usually. And so this generation, they're sort of, because of all the tools and the different technology they have, the access they have, they're acting a little older intellectually. But we're seeing with the delays because of COVID and being out of school, we're seeing them emotionally being a little younger. And it's going to be a very, very interesting generation to watch. It's certainly going to be different. The first generation born in the 21st century completely. So I just wanted, because we are the people who, while these kids are young and we can give them stories and messages and help them in their understanding of such a complex world they're being born into, these voices are so important. And Julianna, I had asked you if I could kick off this question with you about what you're seeing in terms of sort of acknowledgement and acceptance and encouragement of diverse voices and even mental health and some of the challenges there that we have with, our storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the conversation has been slowly shifting from like just, what's the best story to also like who is telling it, and like a real shift to authentic voices. The real like why me of the big three. And yeah, I mean, I think there has been a lot of progress made from, the early days of children's media, and there's also still a long ways to go. Like there, for example, are a lot more queer characters on screen, and there are a lot more people of color and with exceptionalities, but they're like still far and few between. And, I would love to see characters who like wear hijabs, like characters who are neurodivergent, like characters who have different gender identities beyond like boys and girls. Especially I think at this age when everything can feel like so like every sort of difference that you feel like can feel so isolating. Seeing yourself on screen is like huge. And I know that if I had seen queer characters on screen when I was a kid, I think like the first gay character I can remember seeing is maybe like Damien from Mean Girls, like if I had like seen queer characters just existing in the world in the way that I've tried to do with my film, I feel like I would have been able to name like what I was feeling and, understood like what was going on for me. Whereas like it took me much later in life to come to terms with like the fact that I was queer. Yeah, and I think like it does also tie into mental health, because like, being able to like see yourself and like normalize your experience, I think that does affect like how you are interacting with the world, and like how it could be like it's just like it's very validating And yeah.
And it's so important for the audience to see diverse and rich characters, to see people different than themselves, or to find themselves on screen too. I should have also said, if anybody in the audience would like to pop questions into the chat, I am moderating the chat and we'll keep an eye on that for, so I know some of you have already started, but I just wanted to encourage that, and I'll be weaving those in as we keep going through.
Well, I think this is an audience that the Gen Z and Gen Alpha audiences don't just expect to see it, they're surprised when it's not there, because for them it's a perfectly natural thing. They, you know, if you start talking about gender differences and such, they'll just look at you like, why is this an issue? I do want to, there are two great resources out there that I want to raise for filmmakers, not just emerging, but all filmmakers, that I think can really help with this. One is the Gina Davis Institute, that's done some really good research on what's there now. So, you know, if you look at children's television and film from 2021 and such, they can break down the main characters, the secondary characters, you know, by a lot of different factors, and give you an idea of what diversity looks like at the moment. But then also out of UCLA, there's Yalda Ools and the Center for Scholars and Storytellers that's doing some really important work on authentic diversity. And this is a generation, this, you know, Gen Z and Gen Alpha have a very quick bullshit detector, if I can say that. They will look at something and say, no, that's not what our life is like. That's not, you know, you're forcing this on us, and they will reject you very quickly if they feel that. We had a friend of mine who's a researcher with another company was talking with a kid who said, look, you've screwed up the real world so far. Please don't screw up our media in the same way. Try to get it right.
I'd love to jump in just on a couple. Sorry, do you want to go ahead, Julianna?
No, go ahead.
Just on you know, I know we've mostly been, and I mostly focused a lot on, you know, feature-length film and English language film for a reason, just because those tend to be a sweet spot and the more general area that I think we start with. But I don't want to overlook the importance of short films, particularly in the space of family film and kids media, because there's so much, like, because I feel like that's the one space where people are feeling like they can't, well, it's a little bit of a calling card, but there's also just a capacity to be, I mean, I know, you know, Julianna, you started Aaron's Guide to Kissing Girls started as short, a really amazing short that was picked up by Frameline and, you know, was out in distribution and being used in schools, you know, an amazing film, and that you were able then to translate into a feature. But like, there's, you know, that's where if you look at most children's film festivals, you know, there's the bulk of the programming really is in the shorts program, because that's, I mean, a lot of it obviously has to do with attention span, but it also, you know, for me, it's an opportunity to be able to show, to give kids, like, you know, basically you're getting the bigger bang for your buck. You get to see like 8 films about, you know, 8 different stories and 8 different styles and 8 different, you know, and it gives a greater sense of diversity of experience through that. And within that too is just to say also that I think there's greater capacity, particularly for, you know, emerging filmmakers, to at least get the foot in the door and start recognizing how they can have an impact. You know, the big challenge, of course, is that there's less, you know, there's less opportunities and platforms for short film, or there have been. I feel like now, because of the way platforms have changed and how people are, you know, watching content, that, you know, to seek those out, there's so much more accessible in the short film space that we're overlooking. Or can overlook. And then the other, of course, is that, you know, non-English language content, you know, is another incredible, you know, as someone who works in education, is an incredible resource for being able to share stories from around the world for kids, not only to hear other languages, but, you know, for kids who are English, you know, English is their second language, you know, ELL learners. It's an incredible resource, you know, particularly here where we are, you know, we have a very substantial Latinx community. And, you know, so we show a lot of content that's, you know, in Spanish. And, you know, I'm reminded of this because there's a question in the Q&A from Giselle Jenny, who is an incredible filmmaker in Colombia, who came to Mill Valley with a short film, I think in like 2018, and just like, I mean, blew away the education experience of going out to schools and talking to filmmakers, and has been part of a, you know, cohort of filmmakers in Colombia that's been making short films about young people, and like, which it seems like such a crazy and interesting niche, and but it's like, it's so critical that that kind of thing is happening, I think, all around the world, and that it just, there's something incredibly compelling about being able to share those types of films with young people and for them to see, their peers around the world. And it goes back, to my passion about film as a learning and educational resource. But again, embedded in the incredible storytelling, it just goes a really long way.
Kelly, I just wanted to jump in and speak to your earlier point as well about social and emotional learning. And I think Joanne points to it with respect to storytelling, because it's one thing we have to remember is for emerging filmmakers, young filmmakers, whoever's watching, we are emotional architects, right? We are the designers of emotional experiences, and that's a privilege, and we have to be very careful with it. And so when our audience is composed of kids and families, that's a very special kind of power and magic. And that's why I personally always love movie theaters, because it's such a spell you get to sort of walk into, and the whole world dissipates when those lights go down. And even though that's not the way that we're consuming media right now, I think the makers of media have to be very aware in this space of exactly what social and emotional lessons we're trying to communicate, and what social emotional messages are embedded in all of our stories. Because to the earlier point, my 4-year-old nephew is incredibly intelligent about gender identity and technology, but he's 4 years old and he doesn't know how to deal with rage or grief or comfort or angst or anxiety. And so I think that we have a certain responsibility as we put all these pieces together to make sure that at the core is, that we're honoring our responsibility here to be teaching social emotional lessons, whether they're overt and, a large part of the piece, or subtle and baked in.
I'll jump in here quickly to say that I am completely obsessed with shorts and what they can do for filmmakers. When I volunteered at a very fresh, young 19 years old, 1,000 years ago, it was Sundance that taught me that the shorts are their own format. And when you're a storyteller, it's a wonderful challenge to honor that format and make sure you find the perfect story, as Julianna mentioned, that has to be told by you, has to be told now, it has to be relevant to now. And that short film format is so incredible. Some of my favorite films of all time, sorry, Dad, are short films. And I have a list. I also talk to any filmmaker at all for free if they want to talk about their choices in their short films. It's myname@gmail.com is my email address. Happy to share all that stuff. I cannot say enough about how much I love short films and what they can do. They're financially accessible. They might not make a lot of money, but they're a phenomenal opportunity, and especially for this audience who's finding where their audience is and where they hang out. It's just an incredible opportunity. So please call me if you need help with your short. I am obsessed with them.
Can I put in a plea that we not think of it as kids having short attention spans? I think that's been a trope in children's media ever since the days of Sesame Street, when they were worried that by the format of Sesame Street, we were shortening kids' attention spans. If you have ever watched a child build in Minecraft, if you've watched a child who gets totally absorbed in a feature film, if you've watched a child in a book they love, kids have the attention span for this. We work with a model at Dubit that we call emotional scheduling, that has to do with how kids make decisions throughout the day, using things that are proxies for their emotional state to make choices about not just media, but also about what kinds of play they engage in, and it has to do with what time of day it is, or am I ramping up, am I ramping down, am I with other people, or am I on my own? Do I want, how much time do I have? What have I been doing? What am I about to be doing? And I think a lot of the frequency of choosing short content has to do not with attention span, but with how much time they have available to them, and knowing I don't want to get into a feature film if they're going to pull me away to go to school in 10 minutes or to go to swim class or something, because I'll only be frustrated. Stories have to reach the length that they deserve to be. And one of the great things about the streaming era is that stories can reach the length that they need to be. We're not limited to the 30 and 60-minute formats any longer.
Yeah, I think
I would also,
go ahead,
sorry, I
Jen.
would just add to that too, that I think that oftentimes there's an underestimating of what kids can, quote unquote, handle, or what are subjects that are appropriate for kids, and that we are in an era where, parenting is a little different than, say, it was when I was young, as far as, the expectation of what kids are, what is too scary, what is too much, what is, a subject that they can't process, I find, for me as a festival curator, like that's always a critical thing for me, of just, providing the opportunity for them to see things that, that give them a little bit more, credit for their ability to process and appreciate, and particularly in when, being able to provide a context where we can have conversations about them, creating curriculum to support it when they're within education context, and having conversations with filmmakers. And obviously that's not always the case, but you like to think that parents are, able to have those conversations with their kids and willing to, and that media and film is an incredible entry point for that, if they allow it to be. And not presuming that, there are certain things that they just can't see, even though, of course, they're probably seeing those things and way worse in other places. When it comes to, choosing films, sometimes that it's always a touchy, even when it comes to like gender issues, it's amazing to me how that still can seem like, a sensitive issue, when, as you said, that, we know that they all know that inherently, and it's not an issue. But that's something that, we always, that generational gap and dynamic is always at play. But, to give kids a little bit of credit for what they can appreciate.
Yeah, and that's such a.
I
that's
just
such-
want to.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Julia.
No, I just want to add to that, because Joanne has been such an integral part of the journey of our feature. But when we first started showing Team Marco to kid audiences, which is a real privilege, right? Because where am I getting 300 kids in one room to see it, to see the film live in collectively, and it was there was a lot of concern while we were making it, like there are themes of divorce, there are themes of death. I mean, he loses two grandparents in the film. Like, can kids handle this? And the answer is yes. And if you do it thoughtfully, and you do it with great consideration, they can. And we had kids at those screenings running and bounding from their seats to say, like, my parents are divorced and my grandmother died. And suddenly these were, like Joanna is saying, pathways to conversations and to connection among themselves, as audience members having watched the same media for conversation. And it was really fascinating and wonderful to see. So I second that.
Yeah, and that's what you guys are talking about. What you all are talking about is just this perfect. It's just the way that there was some of the research I was reading today to prepare for this. What are we doing? We're doing a webinar. I was reading some of this, some stuff about Gen Z and Gen Alpha that sort of struck me. They're saying that one of the characteristics of this generation is that it's so. The world is kind of open to them in a way that it never has been. It's kind of like parents encourage them. You can do anything you want. You can be anyone you want. You can be, whatever gender you want. You can marry or be with anybody you like. It's this massively different perspective on the world, where even some of the constructs we grew up with are no longer there. And that is incredibly exciting, but it's also like you're giving kids a giant blank sheet. There's nothing, there's a lot of sort of paralysis that we're seeing in some of these young people already, in the Gen Z in particular, and they're expecting that to kind of carry through with the Alpha, that I think could be a very interesting way to think of the kinds of stories we want to tell kids and we want them to experience, to see what different lives can be, what are all the different possibilities. And with these concepts, I've been reading, I was reading the book, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which is one of these kind of books where we have, here's the 8 million ways your life could have been led. so this concept is very now, right? This idea of all these possibilities and choices you can make in adult fiction, but it's something that I think we need to think a lot about for kids as well. David, I know you've been thinking about, the metaverse is a catch-all phrase, so forgive me for using it, but but I know you're thinking a lot about some of these different trends and things, ways that kids are living their lives and how that's influencing their media choices and what we might want to do for them. So I'd love to kick off with you for this question.
I think what you just said is spot on, and I was just getting ready to say, let's talk a little bit about games and about this metaverse concept, that these are worlds where you can try out different identities and you can do it in a safe way. If you are in a town where you can't come out, because you won't be accepted by the people who are physically close to you in your town, you can find a community online. You can experiment with how you have your avatar. You can present yourself in any, in a more authentic you. And if it doesn't work, if you find, no, that's not really what I thought I was, then you can make changes that and keep adapting and keep trying out the different aspects of your personality. Now that has cautionary sides too. In a world where you can be anything, what is it appropriate to be? I'm fascinated right now, and I don't have an answer about digital appropriation. Basically, if I present myself as a Black person in a game, is that inappropriate? Is that just, as I say, I haven't figured out the answers yet, but I think there's a lot to learn from it. This is a generation that expects to be engaged in the media around them. They expect to be consulted. It's not the old, we are going to serve you up media and you are going to take it because it's all that you've got. One of my favorite, we live in an era of fandoms, and there are now opportunities for people to express their fandom. So if they fall in love with a story, with a character, they have ways to tell their own stories around it, to generate their own stories, to generate their own art around it. As I say, the company I work for does a lot of work with Roblox. And one of my favorite stories I've come across, a company called Coolaby, a UK company that owns a franchise called Warrior Cats. Warrior Cats has something like 9 million books sold, and it's got a very active fan community that tells stories around the world that they've created. So they make YouTube videos, they write fan fiction, they make fan art. And a couple of years ago, Coolaby thought, well, you know what, we should probably be on this Roblox platform. We should have a presence there. I'm going to take a small sidestep and say, for anyone out there who doesn't know what Roblox is, the 30-second version is, it's not a game. It is the YouTube of games. Anyone can make a game for Roblox. You can play any games. It's free to play. You can spend money in it, but you don't have to. There are tens of millions of games on the Roblox platform. So going back to it, Coolaby thought we should be there. This is where kids are right now. And they decided, before we commission someone to make a game, let's go and see if anyone has made any Warrior Cats games. And they found about 2 dozen. And one of them they looked at and they said, you know what, if we were going to make a Warrior Cats game, this is what we'd make. So why should we go back to the ground zero or to square one and spend all the money to remake what this person has done amazingly? It was a teenager in Florida. They went to that teenager and said, look, why don't we become partners in this? You keep building that game. We will provide you with creative and financial resources, and you'll become our official game. This is the world we're living in now. There are 2,000 Lego games on Roblox, none of them created by Lego. When Squid Games came out on Netflix, in the first month, there were 100,000 Squid Game games on Roblox, none of them created by Netflix. Now, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, Netflix would have sent cease and desist letters to every one of those things, those games. Now, one of the top creative people at Netflix said, this is great. This is what we want. You are promoting our series. You're doing it, for free for us. And we're learning how you see our content, how you see our stories, and how you want to engage with them. So for future iterations, for future series, for our next commissionings, we have a better insight into our audiences.
Yeah, this is so great because children's media, it's so often we think about how we can reach kids across all different platforms, right? We think about, I started in children's television, so so we always thought about the TV shows, the center, but then there were like, of course, what are the toys that are going to spawn imagination? What are the different games that they can play? What are the internet games? What are the mobile games as those came out? So it's so exciting to think about that. Some film does it, but it's risky.
And it works across the life cycle of a story as well. We made a very small Roblox game for a new story that was about to appear on television. It came from books that a guy had written for his kids. They were not well-known books, but he'd gotten a television commission. And he was afraid no one would find it because they wouldn't know what it was. And we built this very small Roblox experience. And in the first weekend, we had tens of thousands of plays. But even more important, we had people making YouTube videos saying, what is this? Where can we find more of this? What's this story? We've never seen this before. So before you launch into a major expenditure on a feature film, on a television series, it may help to design a little proof of concept inside a gaming world that lets people play with your content and say what it is that they want.
And could you talk a little bit about also the filmmaking going into the world of VR and some of the exciting conversions happening in VR headsets and things like that? Yeah.
Others may know more about this than I do. VR has been the next big thing for quite a while, and
30 years.
Yeah, and now the price of the headsets is coming down to a point where it's more affordable for some families. I mean, it's still going to be a very privileged medium. I think it's a fascinating, it's a whole different world of storytelling because you really do need to offer your audience choice and exploration. They are exploring in a 3D world. So you really have to think about all the directions that they could go and how either to steer them back to where you would like them if you want to tell a more linear story, or how to just create an expanding world where your audience doesn't need a linear thread to it, but prefers to explore on their own and create their own storylines. I'm actually probably a little more intrigued with the possibilities of augmented reality right now, of AR, of this idea of tagging the world with content so that you could go out and see things that happened in different places. And were I a filmmaker, particularly a documentary filmmaker, I might be thinking of augmented reality as a way of deepening the connection with content. There's a wonderful example, and I'm going to forget the name right now, but I'm sure it's easy to find. There are people out there who realize that most of the statues in the world right now are white males on horses. And so they've started creating statues of Black heroes, and through augmented reality, you can place them anywhere you want. You can call them up wherever you are, and you get a history of that person, but also they can tie them to a particular place that is relevant to the statue that they're creating. So this idea of making the world, making the story beneath the story visible, and I think is very powerful.
Thank you.
I think I just want to, if I may,
please.
Just provide a counterpoint. I think it's important to balance this conversation always, knowing that the truth of the matter is the world around us is falling apart. And it's really important to teach our children that there is a time and a space for gaming. There's a time and a space for the metaverse. And there's also a time and a space for the real world that you live in. Yeah. So, while I have great respect for the opportunities that a lot of new media is given us, as filmmakers, I think we have to go into it with more than a dose of caution with respect to what is being told on these media, and how are that sense that you're talking about, Kelly, of limitlessness, right? Of all the options are on the table. That's stifling even to Generation X or Zennials. I think I'm in the middle, right? Like, I don't need 95 serials. I just need one, right? I don't need, and so there's a beauty in it, and there's also a confusion and an anxiety that comes with it. And so I think, there's great joy for me, and obviously I'm advocating for the film format, right? But there's great joy for me in that a film begins and it ends. And that there is someone sort of responsible, a creative team, for what is the message and what is the craft that's been explored from beginning to end. And I think that as we kind of expand the possibilities of media into everything that David is saying, and I say this with great respect for the work that's happening in those spaces, that we always stay cognizant of. There's actually value to limits sometimes, and there's value to structures that were I won't say millennia old, at least 100 years old, because they've given us such beauty as well. So
I don't dispute that in the least. I think that's perfect, and I think we absolutely see young people today faced with paradox of choice. That there are so many options that they become paralyzed and don't know what to choose. It works for some, it doesn't work for all. Whenever I give talks on the metaverse right now, where I start is saying it's not here yet. If I speak about it in the way that I would love to see it develop, then I'm sending you home with that in your mind as the direction in which we can develop it. We have screwed up so many technologies for kids by marketing first and substance later. I really don't want to see that happen this time around, but your points are right on.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that I really try to impress on my own students is that coming to, we're a top television, film, and radio program. And what we're trying to train them to do above all is focus on story, right? That's the most important piece. The technology is all going to change, but that ability to craft stories, no matter what genre you like to work in, is so critical. And, I have really benefited from having a grounding in story myself when I've asked to work on other products and projects and technologies. Because honestly, that there's a lot of people are kind of technology first, story second. And that's, I think, David, what you're talking about when we see failures happen. It's, we're all here to hear stories. And that's what we love as a people, as a human race. It's just so important to know how to tell good stories. I do, go ahead, David, sorry.
I was just saying with not a panel and an audience that wants to draw people to watch their film in a theater in particular, but watch anywhere and focus on it. I had the strangest experience a few weeks ago that Spin Master, the toy company, has launched Bakugan episodes, animated series in their Roblox world. And I thought, well, let me go and see how you do this, because I've been wondering what will film and video look like in the metaverse. And I went in and it asked me to choose an episode, and then it led me over to a big screen, and there were all around me other avatars bouncing up and down and sitting and watching the screen. And I had this sudden and really weird realization that they weren't watching the same episode that I was watching. They came in and chose an episode for themselves. And what this game was doing was creating a false community, a feeling that I was watching with people when I really wasn't. It was very strange.
Or it sounds like an old language lab at a university. Everybody's listening to their own things, but you're all in the same room almost, right? Remember those rooms? Well, I think since we're talking a little bit about the future, I think it's a nice time to talk about our advice for young filmmakers. We're in our last 15 minutes. And so I just want to offer you all the chance to speak to those students who are attending today and who are thinking about breaking into the careers that you are already in. So, and if any of you need interns, PAs, anything like that, just let me know. We have a healthy crop of incredible students. Lindsay, do you want to start with this one? Since I know this is your passion, is helping young filmmakers get their start.
So much. Anything more than I've already said? I mean, I think to start, the one thing that I always want to go, no, don't do that is, and something that my dad made numerous mistakes about is knowing what this whole conversation has been about is knowing. I always say, I don't know why, but maybe somebody's talking through me, but I always think of like, what river are you stepping into? I really encourage people, and obviously if you're coming to a talk like this or going to one of Kelly's classes or thinking about anything, even consuming media, I think it's really important to know what people are making around you. And then doing your bit to, as we've been saying as well, become a master of storytelling in whatever format that you're going to end up. And then practice and keep going, but don't put your house, on the line, and don't put your relationships on the line. There are very famous producers out there. My dad wasn't famous because he didn't care about that, but he was very successful. And the most important part of that is that he was a happy person. He was happy because he was focused, generous. He went outside a lot. He did not care about the 67 Oscar nominations his films garnered. It was great. It was really fun, but he didn't do it for that. He loved his wife, my mom. They were together for 44 years until he died. He loved us kids. He fed his body, his soul, his work. He loved his friends. So I really always seem to get down to telling people, be very honest with yourself about what you need out of this, because it is extraordinarily difficult. And if you need attention and fame and outward success and validation, there are other healthier ways to find it. And really that's about being seen and heard, and not to get too gooey, but it's about loving yourself, not needing another person to say, hey, well done, that's so great. My personal experience was that I had a meditation where I was like, I would love to contribute to the world. Bit of pressure on that end because my parents were so extraordinary that way. And I had this kind of dream. I was like, if I can just be a part of helping one film that will help the Indigenous community of whatever part of the world, I will feel like I can die tonight. My mom died in her sleep. So this is the positive takeaway. I'm like, what if you die tonight, girl? What do you want to work on? And I had this dream, and 6 weeks later, a friend of mine told me about his film, and I was very jealous at first. I was like, damn it, that's exactly what I want to work on. And then of course he invited me to work on it. And then when it came out, it's out on Netflix Canada now, and it will be for 4 years. So you all have a long time to watch it. And hopefully we're going to have good news about distribution in the States very soon. But at the end, I was like, yeah, it feels really good. But working on it felt 10 times better in a way. And I'm so happy it's out because other people get to see it now. But it's that's the proof to me that I'm not doing it so that it's out there, so that I can say I'm an X, my film's on X. And if you don't like the process, then this is not the industry for you, because it is so hard and it takes years. My dad always laughed when people said, oh yeah, my film took me 4 years. He's like, only 4 years? Are you kidding me? Or I got told no. And so, he would work on these things for sometimes decades. So know what you're going into. Don't look at that as, don't let that put you off, but be very honest with yourself and become the most incredible storyteller. Because if you do, you'll get what you're getting out of this industry when you sit down at dinner and can recount a great story to your friends. So yeah, and again, just the offers out there. I would love to talk to any emerging filmmakers for free. My name at gmail.com. Happy to do it. Please tell me about the short film you want to make, and then I'm going to tell you all the mistakes I made. So it's been fantastic to be in the room with you all. If I don't get a chance to say thank you.
And I'll just say, if you haven't read about Jake Eberts' legacy, it's just incredible. I encourage you to look him up. And then the film that Lindsay's referencing is called For Love, correct? Yeah, okay, if that right. Okay, and now over to Julia. Do you want to give some advice for our young filmmakers? And Julio's film.
Sure.
Mark.
I echo Lindsay's gratitude for being here today. Thank you to everybody, and thanks for having me. And it's an honor to be a part of this group for this afternoon. I'm just going to tell you all the Lindsay said the word earlier. Entrepreneurial spirit is very important in the business. If you go back and Google a talk by the Duplass brothers, now probably 6 or 7 years ago, it might be more than that. Mark said, what is it? The artillery is not coming, the chariots are not coming. Forgive me, I'm messing up the quote, but you got to do this. You got to go out and you got to do this and you got to make it happen for yourself. And a part of that is sort of, using all of the talents that you have and resources that you have and spirit about why you love to do what you do, because no one is knocking on anyone's door to hand them a 3-movie deal. No one's knocking on anyone's door and handing them whatever it is we're all seeking. So, you got to make that happen. And the last thing I'll say too is, take advice from people that you genuinely want to grow up to be. As you, perhaps leave Syracuse and find yourself in New York or LA or some of the more, larger media hubs, everyone's got an opinion about how to succeed. Everyone will sit you down for 3 hours and tell you their opinion about how to succeed. At some point, you have to start to sort of weed through that and cut your losses quickly and sort of see the red flags and really sort of find your way toward the good people, because there are a lot of good humans in this industry, and finding them will make the journey so much more productive and joyful for you. So.
Great. Julianna, I'd like to go over to you. And I also just want to, there's a question in the chat, in the Q&A, about what advice do you have in making film for kids and family versus YA? And it was from somebody who is excited about authentic queer storytelling towards family audiences. So I just want to throw that into yours as well, if you have any comments on that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question, but I guess I saw within the question, like telling authentic stories. And what I've been hearing a lot throughout this conversation is also like, the way things like move really quickly and whatnot. And a way that I worked to create my film and give it more of an authentic voice was that I was workshopping it with young queer people every step of the process. And especially when I cast the 3 leads, from the start, I was like, listen, I'm like someone in my like late 20s, like trying to recall what it was like to be 13, 14 at that age. And I'm writing from my experience, but also like, I'm not like a young kid living through the world today. So if something doesn't feel authentic, if something feels off, like I'm not like that precious. Like we can like workshop dialogue, we can workshop things to make it feel more real to you. And like there wasn't like earlier drafts too where I was like trying to be more like of the times and like include memes and whatever, and it just felt so cringy, like I was like a millennial trying to write the Gen Z like alpha experience. And so I think like having those honest conversations with young people who are like, listen, like, memes change like week by week, like this is no longer relevant. That was really helpful for me. And then just some advice that I got when I was in university more broadly that I've kept with me throughout the years is that finding your people really matters, and finding the people who will allow you the space to make mistakes, especially at the point that you're at, and to discover your voice. Like the process, the creative process and like the journey is almost just as important as having like a polished end product. And it's just like the people who I've worked with like on my first feature are people who like some of the people who I like met in film school, who allowed me that space when I was that age to find my voice. And yeah, it's made all the difference.
All right. Thank you so much. That was great. The three are three filmmakers. And now over to Joanne and David. Which of you would like to, do you have any advice for our young students? Joanne, go ahead.
Well, I'd just like to actually echo what Julianna said about finding your people. I was going to say, like, the key really is about, I mean, film is one of the most collaborative mediums there is. Like, you can't do this alone, and you shouldn't. And it's very hard to come up with something, you know, spectacular when you're completely in your own vision about, you know, your story and your process. And, you know, it's really just makes such a difference to have the input and the participation of other creative people, and people have different perspectives and viewpoints. But just as Julianna said, you know, being able to find your crew, like, right in film school is where it, like, that's where it all lives. And being able to build on that and know that, you know, there's so many talented people who are, you know, finding the ones who have the same vision that you do. I just think that spirit of collaboration is, I mean, it's one of the things that I love so much about film. And, you know, we teach filmmaking to young people as part of our education programs too. And so seeing that process really play out is like, that's where you see just like exciting things happen. And kids really also, it you know, even for, you know, introverted people, it's like, it makes all the difference. If you can still then focus on, like, you know, then you get to be in the editing suite, and that's fantastic. But, you know, that there's a lot of different ways for, you know, for the artistic process to play out. I would also just make a plug for the fact that, you know, a lot of people don't think about curation and exhibition as a key part of the film industry, as far as a way to, you know, advance your career or a track to go on. That, you know, it isn't always just about the making of the film. I mean, that's what I decided when I moved to the Bay Area, thinking like, I'm going to be an independent filmmaker. And then, you know, I got a couple internships, and I was like, this fundraising thing really sucks. I sort of shifted gears, and I fell in love with curating because I realized that I could have a greater impact on a larger number of films in that space than I could spend years making that one film. If I had the passion for one particular subject or story, or, you know, I could make sure that these stories all get out in the world and get seen by the right audiences, you know, which is like, it's extremely gratifying to me to, you know, have a world premiere for, you know, for Julio's film, and to see, you know, him bring all of Staten Island to Marin County to celebrate that, and to see, like you said, that experience of how kids respond to it in the moment. Like, you know, there's a lot of layers of how you can, you know, participate in the film space. And that also there are a lot of opportunities if you're interested in even just experiencing that, and also having the opportunity to see what other people are creating. Volunteer to pre-screen for film festivals. They need your help doing that. We need more diverse, younger voices, and just more perspectives on what's being submitted. You know, we can't get through everything that gets submitted to us. We bring in tons of pre-screeners for every year for the festival. We actually do 2 festivals a year. We have a documentary festival in May. And we've even started actually paying our pre-screeners for their time, but like, it makes, like, you can then see what's happening out there, and it also, you can, you know, potentially even connect with other filmmakers who are making content that speaks to you and your, you know, vision and your style. So I encourage that for anyone.
Great. Joanne, send some information about that my way. I'd love to share that with our
Will do.
participants. Okay, David, you've got the last minute if you'd like it.
Oh, what a shame. We're out of time. No, I've got 2 parts that I think may seem in conflict at the beginning, but if you think of one as the foundation and the other as the house that you build, then I think they may make sense more. Talk to anyone and everyone in the field about what it is that you want to do, but mostly about what it is that they do and what their experiences have been. I am doing what I'm doing now because I had an informational interview when I was in college, and 10 years later, the person remembered what I had said and had the perfect job for me. You just never know when something like that is going to come back. 2 of the people who I respect most in the industry right now are people that one was someone who sent me her undergraduate final film, and it was absolutely fantastic. And I wrote some letters of reference, and she ended up producing, being one of the creators of Blue's Clues. So you just never know when those things are going to show up again. Watch everything you can, consume as much as you can. I love the International Children's TV Festival because I get to watch 90 programs in a week and just, pick apart and build up all the different ones. And then know your audience, especially if you're making it for kids and families. Spend time on research, learn how to do your own research or find someone who knows what they're doing. So those are the foundation. And then the house on top is be fierce about what it is that you really care about keeping your vision. I've always loved the line that no one ever told the Beatles, buses sell better than submarines. So, stick to what you really care about.